Captain Zigzalera stood at the command bridge of her ship, the Starweaver, her iridescent scales gleaming under the dim starlight. Her 4 eyes narrowed as she watched the small Earth cargo vessel trying to escape through the asteroid field. These humans were proving to be more entertaining than her usual prey. Pathetic creatures, she muttered, her mandibles clicking in amusement. The cargo ship was making sharp turns between the rocks, showing surprising skill. But no one had ever escaped the most feared pirate in 3 sectors. "Your orders, Captain," her first officer, Criddle, asked. His claws hovered over the weapons console. "Disable their engines. I want to see what treasures they're so desperate to protect." Zigzalera's reputation wasn't built on mercy. In 10 years of raiding, she had never left survivors. The crews she captured were either sold into slavery or spaced, depending on her mood. The Starweaver's plasma cannons lit up the void, but instead of hitting their target, the shots went wide as the cargo ship suddenly dropped into a controlled spin, using a nearby asteroid's gravity to slingshot away. Zigzalera's secondary hearts quickened with interest. This was new. Her prey usually panicked, making stupid mistakes, but this pilot was different. "Clever," she purred, "but not clever enough." She took manual control of the weapons, leading her target with practiced ease. The next shot caught the cargo ship's engine, leaving it dead in space. "Boarding party ready, Captain," Criddle reported. Zigzalera decided to join them. Something about this crew had sparked her curiosity. When they cut through the airlock, they found the humans waiting with makeshift weapons, tools and metal bars. No crying, no begging, just determined faces. A tall human male stepped forward. Unlike the others, he was completely calm. "I'm James Chen, the navigator," he said, meeting all 4 of her eyes without flinching. "We're carrying medical supplies to mining colonies. Taking them will cause the deaths of innocent families." Zigzalera laughed. "And why should I care about human families?" "Because you're not just here for cargo," James replied. "You're looking for something worth your time. I watched how you flew. You're bored. You want a challenge." Her crew tensed, waiting for her to kill this insolent human. Instead, she found herself intrigued. "Explain how you managed that gravity slingshot maneuver." "Trade you," James said with a slight smile. "The technique for my crew's lives." Zigzalera's inner eyelids blinked rapidly. In all her years of piracy, no one had dared to bargain with her. They were too busy screaming or offering pointless bribes. But this human was different. He saw her not just as a threat, but as an intelligent being who could be reasoned with. "Your crew will be imprisoned, not killed," she decided. "You will come to my ship and share your knowledge. If it proves valuable, they live. If not..." She let her claws click against her armor meaningfully. James nodded. "Deal." He turned to his crew. "It'll be okay. Trust me." As they led the humans away, Zigzalera found herself studying James Chen. He walked like someone who understood power, not the brutal force she wielded, but something more subtle, something that made her want to understand how his mind worked before she decided his fate. For the first time in years, the terror of the void felt something new, genuine curiosity about another being. And that was more dangerous than any weapon in her arsenal. 2 weeks passed on the Starweaver, and James Chen was proving to be the most unusual prisoner Zigzalera had ever kept. While other captives huddled in their cells, he spent his time asking questions about everything, from the ship's engines to Centaurian eating habits. "Your species sleeps standing up," he asked one day, while showing her how to calculate complex gravity assists. "Isn't that uncomfortable?" Zigzalera's mandibles twitched in what she realized was becoming an increasingly common smile. "We find your horizontal sleeping bizarre, like dead prey waiting to be eaten." Instead of being offended, James laughed. "That's fair. Though I promise humans taste terrible." His casual humor confused her. By now, most prisoners would have broken down or tried to escape. "You're not afraid of me," she stated during one of their sessions. James looked up from the navigation console. Should I be? You're keeping my crew alive, and you haven't threatened to space me in at least 3 days. I call that progress. Before she could respond, alarms blared through the ship. Krital's voice crackled over the comm. Captain, the Blood Ravagers. 3 ships, closing fast. Zegdalera cursed. The Blood Ravagers were her biggest rivals, led by a brutal Drachnid who had sworn to mount her head on his bridge. Battle stations. Prepare for. Wait, James interrupted. Those asteroids ahead. What's their composition? Mostly iron and ice. Why? Perfect. His fingers flew over the console. If you trust me, I can help you win this without losing half your crew. Zegdalera hesitated. Trust was not something pirates gave easily, but something in his steady gaze made her nod. Show me. What followed was the most incredible space battle of her career. James had her ships fire specific patterns into the asteroids, creating chains of explosions that released clouds of metallic ice particles. When the Blood Ravagers fired their energy weapons, the particles reflected and amplified the beams back at them. 2 enemy ships were crippled in the first volley. The third tried to flee but crashed into a spinning asteroid, its sensors blinded by the sparkling debris field. Magnificent, Zegdalera breathed. Such elegant destruction, using the enemy's strength against them. No Centaurian would have thought of it. Simple physics, James shrugged. Sometimes the best weapon is your enemy's overconfidence. Later that night, Zegdalera found herself bringing food to James's cell personally, something she'd never done for any prisoner. Why do you keep learning about us? She asked. You should hate us for capturing you. James considered the question while eating his modified human rations. Hate doesn't help anyone survive. Understanding does. Besides, your culture is fascinating. Did you know you're the first Centaurian I've met who laughs at jokes? We don't joke, she said automatically. Really? Because you've laughed 6 times today. I've been counting. Zegdalera felt her scales flush with warmth. She hadn't realized. Just like she hadn't realized when she'd started looking forward to their conversations, or when his strange human perspectives had begun making her question her own beliefs. Your crew misses you, she said suddenly. I can arrange for you to see them tomorrow. James's smile was like a star going nova, bright and impossible to look away from. Thank you. That would mean a lot. Walking away from his cell, Zegdalera realized she was in dangerous territory. She was starting to care what this human thought, starting to value his opinions, starting to see him as more than just a useful prisoner. And for the first time in her life, the most feared pirate in 3 sectors was afraid, not of battle or death, but of these strange new feelings growing in her alien heart. The message came through an old smuggler's channel. Zegdalera read it 3 times, her scales darkening with each pass. In her private quarters, she pulled up the star charts James had helped modify. You look troubled, James said from the doorway. After the Blood Ravagers incident, she'd given him limited freedom to move around the ship. Her crew had protested at first, but his knowledge of human trade routes had made them all richer. The Drachnid Empire is mobilizing, she said. A massive fleet. Early reports say over 300 warships. James whistled. That's not a raiding party. That's an invasion force. They're using our pirate attacks as cover. Zegdalera's mandibles clicked in agitation. While everyone focuses on small raids, they gather their forces in the outer systems. Earth is their target, isn't it? She nodded. The star charts showed clear patterns. The Drachnids have been pushing closer to Earth space for months. Their emperor believes humans are too dangerous to leave unchecked. Your species adapts too quickly, spreads too fast. James stepped closer to study the charts. She noticed how her crew no longer flinched when he moved near her. They'd grown used to this strange partnership. How many civilian casualties? He asked quietly. Billions, if they succeed. The Drachnids don't take prisoners. Zegdalera had seen their handiwork before, entire colonies reduced to ash. You have to warn Earth. I'm a pirate, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. This isn't my fight. James turned to face her. Everything we've discussed these past weeks, about honor, about finding worthy challenges, was it all just talk? You don't understand. If I help Earth, I lose everything. My reputation, my crew's loyalty. Your crew respects you more than you think, James interrupted. Yesterday, Critel asked me to teach him human card games. Texana wants to learn Earth languages. They're changing, just like you are. Zegdalera stared at him. When had her fearsome pirates started becoming curious? Was this how it started for her too? The ship's comm crackled. Captain, Critel's voice was urgent. Long-range sensors detect Drachnid scout ships. They're mapping hyperspace routes to Earth. James stepped closer. In the starlight, his eyes held the same determination she'd seen when they first met. You told me once that the greatest hunters choose the most dangerous prey. Well, there's your prey, Captain. A whole empire that thinks they can just wipe out my species. Something stirred in Zegdalera's hearts. All four of them. She thought of the stories James had told her, of humans surviving against impossible odds, of their art, their music, their endless drive to explore and understand, even their enemies. If we do this, she said slowly, we do it my way. No noble sacrifices, no heroic last stands. We fight smart, we fight dirty, and we win. James grinned. Wouldn't have it any other way. She turned to the comm. Critel, set course for the nearest Earth outpost. And she glanced at James. Tell the crew to vote. This mission is voluntary. Anyone who wants to leave can take their share and go. The response was immediate. We stay with you, Captain. All of us. Looking at her star charts, at the massive threat looming over Earth, Zegdalera felt something she hadn't experienced since her first raid. The thrill of facing impossible odds. But this time, she wasn't fighting for profit. She was fighting for something far more valuable. She just wasn't ready to admit what that something was. Not yet. Pirates don't help humans. The Earth Defense Commander's face filled the view screen, red with anger. This is obviously a trap. Zegdalera felt her patience wearing thin. They'd spent 3 hours trying to convince Earth's military about the Drachnid threat. Behind her, James stepped forward. Commander Chen, he said, I'm Captain James Chen of the cargo ship Stellar Dawn. Registration number TC-847. Check your records. The commander's eyes widened. James, we thought you were dead. Are you being forced to say this? No, sir. Every word is true. The Drachnids are coming, and we need to work together. Before the commander could respond, alarms blared through the Starweaver. Critel's voice cut through the noise. Multiple ships dropping out of hyperspace. Drachnid signatures. Looks like we're out of time for diplomacy, James muttered. The view screen showed 5 Drachnid warships emerging from hyperspace. Their black hulls absorbed the starlight like hungry shadows. Still think we're lying? Zegdalera asked the commander. Without waiting for an answer, she turned to her crew. Battle stations. The next few minutes were chaos. The Starweaver dove between enemy ships, its superior maneuverability keeping it ahead of their heavy weapons. James worked the navigation console like he'd been born to it, predicting enemy movements before they happened. Earth defense, we need cover fire on our starboard side, he called out. To everyone's surprise, the human ships responded, their railguns creating a barrier of tungsten slugs that forced 2 Drachnid ships to break formation. Zegdalera watched in amazement as her pirate crew and Earth's military began working together. Her gunners called out targets for the human ships. The humans shared their sensor data, giving her a complete view of the battlefield. They're retreating, Critel announced as the Drachnid ships turned away, their hulls scarred by combined fire. The bridge erupted in cheers, both from her crew and over the comm from the Earth ships. Zegdalera caught James grinning at her. What? She asked. Nothing. just remembering how you used to say humans were prey animals. Well, she clicked her mandibles in amusement. Perhaps I was wrong about some things. The commander's face appeared on screen again, this time looking considerably more respectful. Captain Zigzalara, perhaps we should continue our discussion in person. Hours later, in a secure meeting room on the Earth station, Zigzalara found herself doing something she never imagined. Making an honest deal with a human military officer. Her ship would help patrol for Drachnid scouts, and in exchange, her crew would receive pardons for past crimes. "There's one more thing," James said after the details were settled. "We need more ships. I know some other pirate captains who might join us if you can guarantee them the same deal." Zigzalara turned to him. "You want to recruit pirates to defend Earth. Why not? It worked with you." She wanted to argue, but he had a point. And watching him confidently lay out his plans to the Earth commanders, she realized something had changed. She no longer saw him as just a clever prisoner or even an useful ally. The way her heart beat faster when he smiled at her. The way she felt proud when he praised her crew's skills. The way she wanted to protect not just him, but his whole species. "Oh," she whispered to herself, her scales flushing with sudden understanding. Oh no. The most feared pirate in 3 sectors had just realized she was falling in love with a human. And somehow, that was more terrifying than any invasion fleet. Zigzalara stood alone in her quarters, staring at her reflection in the polished metal wall. All 4 of her eyes blinked back at her, and for the first time in her life, she didn't recognize herself. "What am I doing?" she whispered. Her people had strict laws about interspecies relationships. To even consider such a thing was taboo. To actually feel these emotions for a human. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. "Enter," she called, already knowing who it was by the rhythm of the knock. James walked in, carrying a datapad. "Good news. 3 more pirate captains have agreed to join us. Bad news." He stopped, noticing her posture. "What's wrong?" "Nothing is wrong," she said too quickly, her mandibles clicking in agitation. "Right, and I'm a Drachnid ballet dancer." He set down the pad and moved closer. "Talk to me, Zigzalara." The sound of her name in his voice made her scales ripple with warmth. "Centaurians don't. We don't discuss feelings." "You don't discuss a lot of things," he said softly. "But you've been breaking those rules ever since we met." She turned away from him. "My crew whispers. They see how I've changed. How I—" She couldn't finish. "How you what?" "How I look at you." The words burst out like plasma from a ruptured engine. "It's forbidden. Centaurians mate for political alliance or genetic advantage. We don't feel this." James was quiet for a moment. Then he did something completely unexpected. He laughed. "You think this is amusing?" she hissed. "I think it's fascinating," he said, still smiling. "The most feared pirate in 3 sectors is afraid of feelings. I'm not afraid." "Prove it." He stepped closer. "Tell me why you really saved my crew that first day. Tell me why you let me help during the Blood Ravagers' attack. Tell me why you're risking everything to save Earth." Each question hit her like a physical blow. Because you showed me there was more to strength than fear. More to life than taking. More to," she struggled with the unfamiliar words, "more to love than genetics." The moment the word love left her mouth, she froze. But James didn't run away in horror. Instead, he reached out and gently touched her arm, right where her scales were the softest. "You know what humans believe," he said quietly. "We believe the strongest bonds are the ones we choose for ourselves, not the ones forced on us by tradition or biology." A warning alarm interrupted them. Kurtal's voice came through the comm. "Captain, long-range sensors detect a massive Drachnid fleet. At least 200 ships." Reality crashed back. They were about to face an invasion. And here she was, wrestling with emotions like a newly molted hatchling. But when she looked at James, she saw the same determination she felt. "Duty calls," he said with a slight smile. As they rushed to the bridge, Zixilera made a decision. If they survived this war, she would break every taboo her species held dear. She would show them that true strength wasn't in rigid traditions, but in having the courage to feel, to change, to love. Even if that love was for a strange, soft-skinned human who had somehow captured all four of her hearts. The bridge of the Star Weaver was silent as they watched the Drachnid fleet approach. 200 warships against their ragtag fleet of 30 converted pirate vessels and 50 Earth military ships. Those are terrible odds, Kurtle muttered. Just how I like them. Zixilera replied, but her hearts weren't in it. She'd led her crew into countless battles, but never against such overwhelming forces. James studied the tactical display, his face illuminated by the holographic ships. Wait, I have an idea. He looked up at Zixilera. But you're going to hate it. I already hate it, she said, but gestured for him to continue. The Drachnids think they're superior to every species, right? That's why they're confident attacking with their entire fleet. His fingers danced across the console, highlighting specific points in space. So let's use that arrogance against them. As he explained his plan, Zixilera's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of both anxiety and excitement. You want us to, she paused, pretend to betray Earth. Exactly. Your reputation is still feared. Tell them you've changed your mind, that you want to join the winning side. Then, when we're in position, we strike from within. Zixilera finished. It's brilliant and insane. It's also our only chance, James said quietly. She knew he was right. Looking around her bridge, she saw her crew waiting for her decision. These pirates who had followed her into countless raids were now ready to die defending the human world. Send the message, she ordered. The next hour was the hardest of her life. She had to convince the Drachnid commander she was betraying Earth, betraying James. The deception worked. The Drachnids, believing her reputation for ruthlessness, allowed the pirate ships to approach. In position, Kurtle reported. Zixilera looked at James one last time. In that moment, she wanted to tell him everything. How he changed her, how she felt, how afraid she was of losing him. Instead, she simply nodded. Now, James shouted. The battle erupted like a supernova. The pirate ships, now inside the Drachnid formation, opened fire at point-blank range. Earth's fleet struck from the other side, their weapons targeting the weak points James had identified. The Star Weaver spun through the chaos, Zixilera's expert piloting, and James's tactical genius guiding them. Together, they were unstoppable. Their flagship shields are down, Kurtle called out. But before they could celebrate, a Drachnid cruiser appeared directly ahead. Its main gun was charging, aimed straight at them. No time to dodge, James said, his hands flying over the controls. Zixilera made a split-second decision. She grabbed James, her scales wrapping protectively around him, and barked, ramming speed. The Star Weaver slammed into the Drachnid ship's weakest point. The impact sent them spinning, but James's calculations had been perfect. Their reinforced bow cut through the enemy vessel like a blade. When the explosion cleared, the Drachnid fleet was in chaos. Without their flagship, and with their formation shattered, they began to retreat. We did it, James whispered, still held tight in Zixilera's embrace. We actually did it. She realized she was still holding him and started to pull away, but he caught her clawed hand in his. Around them, the bridge crew pretended not to notice. Captain, Kurtle reported with a slight click of amusement in his voice. Earth Command is hailing us. They're asking how a pirate queen and a human navigator managed to defeat the greatest fleet in the galaxy. Zixilera looked at James and did something she'd never done before. She purred, a sound of pure joy that made her crew's antennae stand up in shock. Tell them, she said, that some treasures are worth more than all the riches in space. 3 months after the Battle of Earth, the Star Weaver looked very different. Earth Defense Force logos now decorated its hull alongside its pirate markings, symbolizing its new role as part of the Joint Space Protection Fleet. Zexilera stood on the observation deck, watching her mixed crew of pirates and Earth military personnel working together. Below, a former raider was teaching the human officer how to play a Centaurian strategy game, while nearby, a human engineer explained Earth music to two fascinated alien pirates. "Credit for your thoughts?" James asked, joining her at the window. After the battle, he'd been offered a prestigious position in Earth's fleet. Instead, he'd chosen to stay with her as the Starweaver's official navigation officer. "I'm thinking about how much has changed," she said, her mandibles moving in a soft smile. "A year ago, I would have spaced anyone who suggested I'd be working with humans. And now you're dating one," he teased. Her scales flushed purple with embarrassment, but she didn't deny it. Their relationship had caused quite a stir in both human and Centaurian space. Some called it scandalous. Others called it the perfect symbol of their new alliance. "The Centaurian High Council wants to meet with us," she said suddenly. "They're interested in our new defense network." "You mean they're interested in how a disgraced pirate queen and a human managed to unite the sector's criminal fleets into a legitimate defense force?" James corrected with a grin. She clicked in amusement. "Perhaps. But it's working, isn't it? Former pirates know all the smuggling routes, all the hidden ways into protected space. Who better to guard against threats? And who better to lead them than the most feared pirate captain in 3 sectors?" James added, taking her clawed hand in his. The ship's comm system crackled. "Captain," Crittle's voice came through. "We've detected unusual activity near the Perseus trading route. Might be those Orion raiders we've been tracking." "Should we investigate?" James asked, already knowing her answer. Zexilara's eyes gleamed with the old hunting excitement, but now it was different. Now she hunted to protect, not to plunder. "Set course, Crittle. Let's show these raiders what happens when they threaten our space." As they headed to the bridge, James caught her arm. "You know, you never did tell me what made you change that first day. Why did you really spare my crew?" She looked at him, remembering that moment when a defiant human had dared to bargain with her. "Because you showed no fear," she said softly. "You showed respect instead. It made me curious." And curiosity, she touched his face gently with one claw, led to something much more valuable than any treasure I've ever stolen. The alert klaxon sounded, calling them to action. As they rushed to the bridge together, Zexilera felt all 4 of her hearts swell with pride and love. She had found something she never knew she was looking for. Not just love, but a purpose greater than herself. The most ruthless pirate queen in space had become a protector, and she wouldn't have it any other way. As long as she had her crew, her mission, and her strange, wonderful human by her side, she was finally, truly free. "Ready for another adventure?" James asked as they reached the bridge. Zexilera took her captain's chair, watching their mixed crew work together like a well-oiled machine. "With you. Always." The Starweaver leaked into hyperspace, carrying its crew of former pirates and Earth officers toward whatever challenge awaited them. And at its helm, an unlikely pair proved that love could bridge the gap between the stars themselves.